Thanks, everybody. I'm glad to see y'all here today. Let me tell you, I am filled with joy at this gathering. I know that our nation has faced some tough times, especially in the last couple of years. But what I have been seeing is folks like you who are willing to get out to learn about constitutional principles and then put them in action. And that's part of what being here today is about. It's about putting our principles in action. Can I get an amen? All right. Let's talk a little bit about those principles. You know, I love how Mr. Temple started us off today, reading from the Declaration of Independence. And he talked about certain unalienable rights that Americans have always enjoyed. What are they? We got three of them. We got life, right? We got liberty. And we got the pursuit of happiness. Now, when I think about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, one image jumps immediately to mind. And it may not be the same image that you have, but I think of a little kid outside of their house with a lemonade stand in the summer, learning about market principles, learning about entrepreneurship, having fun, raising a little bit of money, not hurting anybody, right? In my mind, that is the image of the pursuit of happiness and also of life and liberty. But not everybody thinks that this is such a good idea, do they? Have y'all heard in the last couple of years you've got local government officials all over our country telling little kids that it is illegal for them to have a lemonade stand out on their own property. Have y'all heard about this? Well, I want to let you know that my organization, the Freedom Center of Missouri, is not content to watch this happen. We believe that when the Constitution protects property rights, it really means what it says. We believe that when you're protecting property rights and the right to enjoy the gains of your own industry and to enjoy the pursuit of happiness, it means that, if nothing else, you ought to be able to engage in such an innocent, harmless behavior as a couple of little kids selling lemonade or cookies out in front of their house. And so I'll tell you what we did about this. We went and we sued the city of Hazelwood, Missouri, because the bureaucrats at the city of Hazelwood, Missouri got it in their head that your property is not your own, that your property belongs to the city itself, and they get to decide anything that you want to do with your own property, including letting your kids have a little cookie stand out in front of their front yard. So last April, Hazelwood went to these two Girl Scouts that lived in their town, and they said, "You are absolutely prohibited from selling cookies to people who pass by on your street." It's not even a question of being able to get a permit. You can't get a permit. The city's ordinances say that the city gets to decide whether you can engage in this behavior on your own property. But we think that's not right. And we think there are a lot of people out there who believe, like we do, that it's not right, that the Constitution protects the right to pursue happiness, and it protects property rights, and it protects liberty. So what we're doing is we're out there in the courts, and we're trying to persuade the courts that the era of big government really is over. Now, you might not believe that to see what we've seen out of our governments over the last few years. But I believe that there are people like you who are providing a wellspring of liberty, a wellspring of constitutional principle. And enough of us start to stand up and punch the government in the nose when they step over their lines, we're going to start pushing back the tide. And we really will bring an end to the era of big government. Am I right? Now I want to tell you, we're up against some big odds. Because when the government is taking all of our taxpayer money, they can then turn around and direct it against our own interests. That's what's happening in Hazelwood. They went and they hired two of the best municipal attorneys in the city of St. Louis. They're spending tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to fight little old me. And it's a question of using the taxpayers' resources against them. Okay? So we got a big hill to climb. We also have to fight the fact that over the last several decades, courts have been all too content to let the government do pretty much whatever it wants to do, even if that means stripping people of their freedoms. But the time of big government is coming to a close. And it's coming to a close because of people like you, people who are willing to stand up and say, we have our constitutions for a reason. We have principles that are supposed to be inalienable, liberties that cannot be taken away from us. We're not going to allow them to be taken away from us anymore. Now I want to talk about some of the examples of just how far government has gone. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're pushing back. You may have heard, raise your hand if you heard about Mr. John Dollarhide and his rabbits over in southwest Missouri. How many people have, we got a handful who've heard about this. Mr. Dollarhide is a gentleman who owns a small farm, and he had a teenage son, and he wanted to teach his son a little bit about the value of a dollar. And so they started to raise some rabbits, and they would sell them off for meat. And they checked at the time that they started this little rabbit selling operation, made sure they were in compliance with the law. And they sold rabbits for a couple of years. They made a grand total of about $500, okay? Just a small operation. But at one point, one of the people who was buying the rabbits decided, you know what, I think this bunny is too cute to use for meat. We want to use it as a pet. Well, little known to the Dollarhide family, the federal government says that it gets to oversee the sale of animals as pets. And so one day, someone from the U.S. government showed up on Mr. Dollarhide's doorstep and said, I'd like to come in and look at your operation. And well, they didn't think anything of it. All they were doing was enjoying their life, their liberty, their pursuit of happiness. They never imagined that they could get in trouble with the government for something so innocent and harmless. But this government official walks in and starts looking around their operation and starts saying things like, oh, well, this cage is a 1/4 inch too short. You're going to have to change that. And, oh, this isn't up to code. You're going to have to change that. And they just kind of scratched their heads and they said, what are they talking about? This is just a little rabbit operation. How can the federal government walk into our home and tell us that we're going to have to start obeying different rules? But in fact, what the government said is not only are you going to have to start obeying different rules, we're going to take you to task because you've been violating the law for 2 years. So the Department of Agriculture sends them a letter that says, we're going to give you a break. They said, we will leave you alone as long as you pay the federal government $90,000. Now, keep in mind, they only ever made about $500 from selling these rabbits. And here's the federal government, the United States government, walking into southwest Missouri and saying, this family, we'll leave you alone if you pay us $90,000. But here's the hitch. If the Dollarhide family did not give them that $90,000, the government said they were going to throw the book at them. And the book says that they could have charged the Dollarhides fines in excess of $3 million. That's what federal law and federal regulation currently allows. This little family in southwestern Missouri, all they were trying to do was teach their child about the value of earning a dollar, and all of a sudden the federal government says, we're going to put you on the hook for $3 million unless you pay our bribe. Now that's not right, is it? That doesn't have anything to do with life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, does it? Well, fortunately, Mr. Dollarhide's a man of principle. He's not a man who rolls over. He's a man who believes that government has its proper bounds, and it is not to exceed those bounds. And so he fought back. And we were able to help him out some. He had a regular attorney, and I offered some insight as far as constitutional issues. And he pushed back until finally the federal government realized that in going after Mr. Dollarhide, it had bitten off more than it could chew. And they let him go. They eventually said, you know what? We're going to leave this guy alone. That's how you can win, folks. You have to push back. And let me tell you, sometimes it can be scary to push back. A great man once said that it's dangerous to be right when your government is wrong. And we all appreciate that, don't we? It can be dangerous. But what America needs right now is people of principle. People of the deep conviction that there was a dream that our nation was supposed to be. And we recognize that it is not right now that nation. And we're willing to fight and do what it takes to get that nation back, right? Absolutely. So what we're doing right now, the Freedom Center of Missouri, is we're finding cases like this. Cases where the government has overstepped its bounds. And we are standing up to help these principled patriots fight back. And we believe that if we persist in these fights, we may not win every battle, but we will eventually win the war. Now let me tell you, we have a case right now. Again, it's over in northwestern Missouri. And I don't know how many, do any folks out here, do any of y'all have farms or horses? Anybody? I don't see many hands, a couple. Folks who work on farms know that for centuries, the way animal agriculture has been done is if you've got a herd of animals, cows or pigs or whatever, every once in a while you need to hire a hand to come onto your property and help out working your herds. That's the way animal agriculture has always been done. There have been these hired hands that you can go out and bring on. The Missouri Veterinary Medical Board has decided that state law makes it a criminal act for anyone to do anything that changes an animal's physical or mental condition if they get paid for it. And they've decided that that applies to hired hands now as well. We've got letters from the state government threatening criminal prosecution against folks here in Missouri simply because they're out earning a traditional living in our agricultural communities. Now that's not right. It is not right that your government should be able to come in and take away your right to earn a living, to take away your livelihood, to take the food out of your children's mouths. Especially when what you're doing is a traditional practice that's been harmlessly done for centuries in the United States. So what happened is the government picked on the wrong woman. There's a young woman named Brooke Gray who makes her living for her family by filing down horses' teeth. This is an age-old animal husbandry practice. It goes back at least 800 years. And the state government has decided that after 800 years, now you have to be a veterinarian if you're going to do this work. Now here's the funny thing. Veterinarians, by and large, are not trained to do this kind of work. Veterinarians spend 3,400 hours in vet school learning how to take care of animals. They spend 1/2 hour of that time learning how to file down horses' teeth. 1/2 hour. Now, people like Brooke Gray, who specialize in this work, they go to special schools that are exclusively dedicated to working with horses' teeth. She spent months training at one of these schools. She went and did a 6-month apprenticeship in Colorado, learning under a master teeth floater. The woman knows what she's doing. She is so good at what she does that the only evidence that the state had that she had broken the law was that a Missouri veterinarian of 28 years of experience, most of that working with horses, called Brooke up to fix a mistake that the veterinarian had made working on her own horse. A licensed vet trusted Brooke so much that she was going to let her fix a mistake that the vet had made on the vet's own horse. And for that, the government says Brooke Gray is a criminal. Well, we're fighting. And we were able to put on evidence in her case that vets, by and large, are not trained to do this kind of work. We put on evidence that this is a traditional animal husbandry practice, that it is not particularly dangerous to animals, and that if there is any danger, the vets are more of a danger to these animals than the trained floaters are. We put on evidence that if you require a veterinarian to do this work, it will put small farms out of business because they can't afford to have a veterinarian come on to do all of this work. It is dramatically more expensive for vets to come and do this kind of work. All of these facts we showed, and yet the trial court says, if the government says that she can't do this, then the government has made its decision, and that's that. The court refused to acknowledge the right of American citizens to earn a living in a harmless profession. Well, that's not right, is it? Well, we're going to continue that fight. Brooke Gray, like I said, is not a woman to be taken lightly. She's committed to protecting not only her freedom, but the freedom of everybody here, the freedom of everybody in this state. And she's going to see this case through. So this year we're going up in front of the Court of Appeals here in Missouri, and we are going to try and make sure that they respect the right to earn a living. Now I want to tell you, the Freedom Center of Missouri is not alone in this. There are groups like ours all over the country. And one of the reasons that I have great faith that we are going to be successful in this fight is because we've seen it happen on the national level. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a group called the Institute for Justice up in Washington, D.C. They've been fighting property rights battles, they've been fighting economic liberty battles, they've been fighting free speech battles, and they've been fighting school choice battles for 20 years now. My wife and I trained with the Institute for Justice. We worked there for several years ourselves before coming to be boots on the ground for liberty in Missouri. And we're using that expertise that we gained at IJ and putting it into practice here. But we are part of a larger movement. All over the country, you see groups like ours fighting on a state-by-state basis, making sure that our government officials understand constitutional principles, whether or not they're going to abide by them. They understand them, and they have to start respecting them. And we're teaching the judges that it is sometimes the role of the judiciary to tell the legislature, you got it wrong. You have to let the people enjoy their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. So what I want you guys to do is keep an eye open for these kinds of groups who are out there, because we're working on your behalf. We're out there and we're making sure that your lawmakers understand the limits of their power. We're making sure that they understand that each of you has freedoms that it cannot take away. Not if there's any sense of justice. Not if there's any sense of our American republic that remains. And so I want you to keep an eye on what's happening. I want you to tell your friends about what's happening, because we firmly believe that the more people understand what their governments have been doing, the more they will be ready to step up and fight to stop it. And that's where you guys are kind of the foot soldiers. You know, you guys are the vanguard. You are the ones who are out there on the front lines. And we need you in your neighborhoods, in your community groups, in your churches, teaching about the Constitution, helping people to appreciate what this nation was intended to be and what it can be again. Now, folks, I'm running out of time here, but I've got one last little plug that I want to make. Like I said, we started up this lawsuit against the city of Hazelwood. We're fighting for the right of people to enjoy lemonade stands, kid-run lemonade stands. And so what we're hoping people will do is on June 2nd to participate in a movement called Lemonade for Liberty. And some of y'all, I know we probably got some Glenn Beck fans here, don't we? So Glenn Beck actually got this idea after we did, but he's got his own bake sale promotion that's going to be happening. We would love for Mr. Beck to learn about the case that we're fighting in Missouri, trying to protect these constitutional rights. I've written to his people, but he gets so many emails, it's easy to overlook them. So if you would like to see the Hazelwood case get a higher profile and hopefully put more pressure on the city to back down, please send emails and calls to Mr. Beck's folks and let him know we've got a fight going on in Missouri on this exact issue. Let him know, and maybe he'll be able to help out by saying something about the case. But in the meantime, on June 2nd, we encourage you to take part in Lemonade for Liberty, especially if you've got little kids. Help them put up a lemonade stand. Go out, make a stand for property rights. Make a stand for liberty. And then, if you're so inclined, please consider passing some of the proceeds over to the Freedom Center so we can continue our fight. In the meantime, we've got our own Lemonade for Liberty stand right up over on the far side of the vendor area. Feel free to drop by. I'm going to be there for the rest of the afternoon. Always happy to talk about your issues, to talk about constitutional liberty. Drop by and see us, and if you're so inclined, buy some Lemonade for Liberty, all right? Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here.